very good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hanspreet Kaur, and I will be taking up your questions, anything regarding interviews specifically in today's session. I am going to start with a brief introduction. I know you all must have watched the video, so you have a fair and rough idea on how you can go about these things. But this is a one-on-one interaction where you can just put in your questions in the chat. A few of you also filled the Google form, which is great. I did go through your questions, so I'll try to address as many as I can today, and the rest, I be rest assured, will be taken up in the next sessions. So I'll just start sharing my screen. Let me know once it's up. Okay. So, I'm sure you all know that there are a few prerequisites to an interview, right? What are the general questions, or what are the general problems or hiccups that, according to you, block you from acing your interview? Or, when you're in an interview, there are a lot of things like nervousness, or you not knowing how to answer, what to say, what not to say. So I just want to hear from you all. If you could just type in one word or in a sentence or two on what, according to you, are the challenges that you face specifically during interviews. Can I get a few responses in the chat, please? Nervousness. That's, I think, the most common problem that all of us face, especially when we're just starting off. Okay, so I've got a lot of nervousness as responses. Not feeling prepared. That's extremely valid, and I'll tell you why. Because being prepared is the first part of you trying to escape that nervousness. Your mind goes blank. Again, a very, very valid problem. Getting an idea of the company's budget, getting blank. Okay. Not knowing what the questions will be asked and how we can tackle it. Feeling of being unprepared when the interviewer asks tricky questions, especially when they ask about us. The most common interview FAQ, which is tell me something about yourself, right? Tackling unprepared topics. Experience. Okay, since you're all starting off, experience can be an issue, that fumbling while answering. Great. Okay, I've gotten some great responses which are extremely valid. And I just want to tell you that be rest assured, today we are going to discuss as much as we can. I want you to keep posting the questions that you specifically want me to tackle. I can see a few basic things that you feel that you struggle with, and I will be addressing those. And then we will be looking at some interview FAQs so that we can talk about it and see how you can answer it and how you can sound well prepared. Great. So let's look at the first part, which is the essentials of preparations of an interview. So I have basically come up with 5 essentials that I feel will really help you avoid that nervousness. It will really help you boost that confidence, and you will be able to speak better, because when you have the adequate knowledge and when you are prepared well, you can resolve half of the problem. Half of your problem is already gone when you know that you're well prepared, right? And since we are just starting off, and we are in the last semester, we will be transitioning into the job industry. It's very important to sound relevant and valid, and to prove to the interviewer that you are made for this job and you will add value to the job that they are going to hire you for. So the first and the most important thing is to just read, read, and read. Reading is extremely important. Now, under reading, it could be general reading, and it could specifically be reading everything that you can about the job position, about your industry, about the stream that you're attached to, about the job, about the company. So reading and researching becomes a very, very essential part, because once you're well read and you know what you're supposed to speak, your nervousness can settle down. You will not blank out. You can blank out sometimes still as well, because that just comes out of a personality trait. But a lot of times you can avoid that if you have the adequate amount of knowledge. And that can only happen if you're researching well. The second one is going through the job description thoroughly, which is very important. And a lot of people don't do that. They just read the job title and they just apply for the job, right? So reading the job description is very important, because be it your resume, be it your interview, everything, every question that is being asked to you can be picked up from the job description. The pointers and the key points that the recruiter and that the company requires you to do can be picked up from the job description. Now, how it relates to resume, we'll see in the next session. But for now, there are a lot of questions, right? Like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? So, a lot of times you don't know how to answer that without sounding cliche, right? Because there are a lot of common words that people usually say, which just sound very, very cliche. For example, I'm hardworking, I am very focused. These are very basic words and they have been repeated for so long that there's nothing new in it. So when you go through the job description thoroughly, it becomes very important that you will be able to see what the job provider needs from you. You will understand what are their requirements from you, and from that, you can pick and mold and frame your strengths and weaknesses, and it will also be relevant to your job, right? Now, going through the organization's website is something a lot of people miss because there are a lot of situations in which the organization, the recruiter in the interview might ask you that, did you go through our website? Do you know what our aim and purpose is? So understanding and knowing about the company is also extremely crucial because that shows that you're interested in this specific job position. Then I always suggest making two lists of questions. Generic and specific is very important to prepare well. Now, generic questions could be, are you ready to relocate? Why do you want us to hire you? Have you applied to other places? There could be a lot of generic questions, right, that we all are prepared for. For example, tell me something about yourself, strengths, weaknesses, your future goals. These are all predictable questions, right? So I always suggest that you make two lists, one of these generic questions so that you can prepare them beforehand. And once you're well prepared, you will not fumble while answering. The second is specific. Now, this is specific to your industry, the job that you're really applying for. If you're from marketing field, if you're from humanities, if you're from science background, so specific to your job position and the role, the questions that you can predict that the interviewer might ask. So once you have these two lists ready, constantly practicing them in your head, writing down key points before the interview will really, really help you gain that confidence to answer well. And lastly, all of this sums up and boils down to you are the interviewer. You have to keep self practicing, and trust me, it really works. It has worked for me, it has worked for a lot of people. When you start creating lists, when you start jotting down pointers and practicing in your head, or maybe with a family member or a friend, you do the role play exercise of being an interviewee and the interviewer, you will be 10 times more confident. You will not fumble. Your nervousness will go down. Therefore, it's always said that you have to be well prepared before an interview. And these are a few things that you can do. You can inculcate in your day-to-day practice before your interview so that you do not fumble. So these are a few things I wanted to share. And before going ahead, I can see a few more questions and I will answer, as I said, as many as I can. There are a few questions I also see around resume building, which is something I will take up in the next session. So I would suggest please drop in questions related to interviews, your problems that you face or that you're scared of, and the general interview questions that you want me to discuss that we can take up today. So I can see questions like salary expectations, which is great. I can see questions like how long do you intend to work with us? And yeah, there are some great pointers here. I will be taking them up. And before that, before taking these up and before going to the interview FAQs, I just have one more slide to share. Okay. So now there are a few essentials that you have to take care of during an interview. What we discussed before that was before an interview. Now we will be discussing the things that you're supposed to do during an interview. Asking follow-up questions is very important. It shows that you're interested, intrigued, and you're really, really looking forward to this job position, right? Now, when it comes to asking questions to the interviewer, there are a few ground rules as well. When the interviewer is talking to you, you should never cut them. You should never stop when they're speaking. You should always have your questions towards the end. You should ask, because an interviewer will also usually ask you towards the end, do you have any questions for me? That's another question that people blank out in, right? that what are the questions that you would want me to ask. You as an interviewee, if you're not asking questions, it shows maybe you're just absent-minded, you're not interested. But having questions shows that you're really interested in what he or she is talking about. Now, this also does not mean that you're trying to show them that you're over smart, you know better than them. It's always suggested to ask relevant questions regarding your role, regarding the job, regarding the organization, and they shouldn't be more than 2 to 3 questions. You shouldn't go overboard and start asking 8 or 10 questions. Just stick to 2 to 3 questions, prepare them beforehand, and trust me, it will leave a mark. Then I will also discuss what are these questions that you can usually ask towards the end. Then always end with a thank you note. That's very important. It shows that you're humble, you're grounded, you're valuing the interviewer's time. Then never talk about salary first. The interviewer will always bring up salary. In a lot of cases, the salary is mentioned in the job description, so this is not valid for that point of time. But when the interviewer is not mentioning the salary in the job description and they are not mentioning it in the conversation as well, you do not do it first. Wait for them to talk about it and then we can tackle it. And how to tackle the salary negotiation question, I will talk about it as well. Then never lie on your resume. Again, I will discuss this in detail during resume building. But why I say this here is because if you start lying on your resume when you're in an interview and the interviewer is going to ask you questions on your resume, it will just lead to a spiral of lies. You have written one lie on your resume, it will lead to you saying 10 more lies. You will eventually fumble and you will give up. So never lie on your resume. Be very honest about your experience, about whatever you've done. And most importantly, do not beat around the bush. If you do not know the answer to a specific question, please be very straightforward about it in the most humble way possible. For this also, I have some situations which I will be discussing either today or in the next session. But do not beat around the bush. Do not say things that do not make sense just for the sake of speaking it. It just ends up irritating the interviewer. So be honest, be humble about your knowledge, because everybody knows that you're just starting off, you're freshers. At the end of the day, they are going to understand that you need more experience, more exposure and guidance to finally be able to step into the corporate world or the working industry. Now, these are some of the interview FAQs that I have collected, and I feel these are something that a lot of people struggle with, and these are something that almost all interviewers do ask during an interview, right? So now I would want you all to pick one of these questions for now, and I will help you tackle that question. Whichever question gets the highest vote, I will be addressing that question first, and then if time allows, we can move ahead with another question, or else we'll just move ahead and also do some mock interviews. So please type in just one of these questions, and I'll pick the one which gets the highest number. Okay, there's a lot of mixed response. Can a few of you, can some more of you please answer so that we can come to a conclusion on which one we are going to pick first? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Your weaknesses? Why should we hire you? Do you have any questions for us? How to handle pressure? Your weaknesses. Why is there an employment gap? Okay. Do you have any questions for us? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Tell us more about yourself. Okay, I'll give you 1 more minute. I need a few more responses and then I'll begin. Yeah. Okay. So, according to my analysis, I think the highest vote goes to the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I actually assume that the first one is going to be something that you all are going to mostly be worried about, which I do see a few people have responded to that. Okay, so we can begin with, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And some of you also mentioned, how do you handle pressure, and tell me about a time when you made a mistake. So these two questions are a part of situational questions, situation based questions, which is something I will come to after I'm done discussing where do you see yourself in 5 years. Okay. So this is a question which is very commonly asked and has been asked for a lot of years now, right? Although personally, in my experience, none of the interviewers have ever asked me that question, but I'm sure they still ask, and in a lot of fields that's relevant. Maybe it's not in my field, but let's discuss that question. So, first, let's understand that what is the interviewer's thought behind asking you that question. Number one, they want to check if you're ambitious, right? That's their main purpose, because they are not going to expect you to say things like they want you to be still working with them in the next 5 years, right? That's not what their aim is. Or they're not expecting you to say that, since you're the boss, it's your chair that I want to be in the next 5 years. That's not what they're looking for. So they're looking for two things essentially. And what is their mindset behind it is to check if you're ambitious and to check if you have realistic expectations from the world and from the job industry. Okay, so these are the two important things which comes from an interviewer's perspective. So a lot of times when people are not prepared to answer this question, they go ahead with cliches by saying things like, I want to be the boss of this company, or I want to stick to this company and learn and grow more. That's not what they're looking for, right? It does not matter if you're telling them that you're going to work with them in the next 5 years or not, because everybody knows that if few people might quit in the next 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. They just want to know your perspective, your realistic expectations, and your ambition. So the best way to tackle this question is by again preparing it beforehand. Now, how do you prepare this beforehand? It comes under the list of generic questions. It's essential for you to weave a story. Now, there can be two situations. One is that you did your graduation or your master's in a specific subject and you're pursuing that, right? So there's a link between your education and what you're going to be working for. When there's a link, it gets easier to answer because they basically want you to briefly weave a story and tell them what are your future goals. They want to see how ambitious you are. So, how do you weave that story? You have to weave a step by step story by telling them what are the things or what are your strengths that you have done in the past, what are the skills that you have attained maybe during your college life, what are the skills that you do possess in general, what are the skills that you think you will be able to develop through this job that you are applying for right now. And then you can go ahead and attach that or link that to your next step, right? And how do you do that? That's essentially by saying that these are the specific skills that I worked on during college. And these are some skills that I also see, which were mentioned in the job description, are something which will come in handy while I work for you under this job position. Since I'm a fresher, I look at myself working towards and enhancing these skills, also upskilling myself in other domains that is going to help me reach this and this specific goal. So, to understand or to make them understand that you have a goal oriented approach, that's how you're going to answer it. And now that completely depends upon your stream, what you're working, what your education qualifications are, and what the expectations of the interviewer are in terms of skills, which you will find where in the job description, right? So, only remember one simple thing: they want to check if you're ambitious, they want to check your future goals, and how do you see yourself. Are you Are you willing to stay relevant? Are you focused? And how do you see that? By knowing that what you want to do next, right? If there's a person who's not ambitious, who doesn't know that what they want to do going forward, it can get problematic, because then they will see that this person is not ambitious. Why do we hire people who are not ambitious? So as a fresher at this stage, that's their only concern, and that's how you can tackle this question well. Are there any follow-ups to this question, or can I take some other question now? Okay, I'll also have a quick glance at the questions that you all had posted in the Google form.
Hanspreet, please look at the Q&A section questions as well, if you have had a look on them.
Yeah, I did, and that's how I discussed this question, right?
All right.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
no problem. I thought I'll just look at the Google form also once, since a lot of them had answered that as well.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so there was a very common question over there. One second, I'm just reading the Q&A section. Okay, so this is a really good question, and honestly, that is something that happened with me. I did my master's in international relations, but now I'm working as a trainer, right? So there's no link at all between the two fields. So when there are things or there are situations where your field of study is different and then you're working in some other field, how do you go about answering the 5-year question? Now, this is a very relevant question, not only in regard to the 5-year question, but in general also. Because if you are switching your career profile, this is a very common question that the interviewer might ask you, that why did you do your graduation or your master's in that specific field while you're actually not working there? Now it's your job or your responsibility to make it sound relevant. And how can you do that? Let's take an example. I'll just take my example here so that you understand the context of the situation and the storyline behind it. So I did my undergraduation in English honors and I did my master's in international relations, right? Now, I worked with the corporate field for about 2 years as an instructional designer as well, which comes under the L&D industry, which is the learning and development industry, but it was not a training profile. 1.5 years later, I decided to switch my career profile to becoming a trainer. Now, when you know that there's something else you want to do, and I'm saying this right now because when you step out, when you finish your college, these are the things that you should keep in mind so that you don't struggle with these questions later. Now, since I knew in the back of my head that I wanted to do something in the field of communication, I did a lot of stuff that I could. I did a lot of volunteering while I was in my master's. I started volunteering for UN. I started taking online training sessions for people in spoken English. Then I did a certification course. Then a few months later, I did another certification, which is still ongoing. So all of these things are something I did while I was working in my corporate job. So I knew in the back of my head that now I want to make this career switch, or I want to do something which is different from my master's degree. So to make it sound relevant and to actually prove that you are making it relevant and then that you are still capable of doing that, the best way is to upskill yourself, to keep upskilling yourself, to keep doing voluntary work or some other part-time jobs which actually prove to be an asset for you while you're actually making that career switch. Now if it only comes to education and you're directly switching your career profile completely from what you've studied, again try to find links and relevance, because ultimately it's how you prove it to the interviewer that it is relevant. Now even though my master's is not related to training, I always make sure that when I'm asked this question, I relate my training job to my undergraduation, which I did in English, right? So I can say that I worked on my English and I have proficiency in English and I have a degree in English, which also links to communication. I did a lot of communication gigs and a lot of practice sessions and did a lot of participations in extracurriculars in the communication field, which actually got me interested in the training field, which is what I want to pursue now. So that is how you can approach it. This is just an example on how you can make it relevant by linking it, by trying to find a bridge between your education, between your skills, between your interests, and the job that you're doing right now. So if you keep that in the back of your head, and 3 years later you want to completely switch your career, you can do that. But to do that, just keep it in the back of your head and keep doing relevant work, keep upskilling yourself in that period where you're not actually doing that job, so that you do not struggle with this question during an interview. What is the best answer for why you have chosen online course and not regular one? Okay, this is something we'll take up later. For now, I'm actually planning to address another question now, which is basically the questions that you can ask an interviewer towards the end. Right? We discussed that it's extremely important to ask the interviewer a few questions towards the end, and a few of you also wrote in the Q&A section that you really want to understand how you can answer that, or how you can, what are the questions basically that you can ask. So I have prepared a very small list of questions for you, which will come in handy, so you can take a note of that. So these are some questions that you can ask. It works for all fields, and that's why I've just restricted it to 5. You can make a note of these. It's very relevant because no matter what field you're in, when you're starting off, these are questions that you can ask the interviewer, and it will show that you're really looking forward to this job. The first one is, what does a typical day look like? Now you're trying to ask them that you're interested in knowing what your day-to-day job life will look like, right? What is a usual 9 to 5? What will be your tasks? What are the kind of things that you will be expected to work on while you start working with them? Then in this role, what are your expectations from me? So you're trying to ask them so that there's an expectation setting that's been made from the interviewer, so that you can be well prepared before your first day of joining, that these are the expectations set out of me, and I will plan my day accordingly, and I will work accordingly, right? So it shows that you're really interested, you're very organized, your thought process is very organized, and that's how you want to approach it. The third question could be, what according to you is the most challenging aspect of this role? So again, it's showing that you have used your critical thinking skills to try, because you're really interested in trying to understand that what are the most challenging aspects of the role, of the job that you're going to do, so that you are well prepared, so that in case there are any unforeseen circumstances in the future, you can be well prepared for that. Then what opportunities are there for professional development within your company? So you're trying to ask for other opportunities where you can develop yourself professionally since you're just starting out. Again, it's a very smart question that you can ask, and the interviewer will be more than happy to answer that. Then what's the performance review process like here? So to understand that, since every company has a performance review process at the end of 6 months or 1 year, you really want to know how that is, so that you can set the benchmark from the first day itself to be able to resolve that issue, so that you do not face any problems towards the end, and you can have a plan ahead from the first day itself, so that you do not struggle during your performance review. So these are some questions that work for all fields and are extremely relevant. So it's going to really help you. Okay. So what to avoid talking about in interviews? I would say just do not lie about anything. And if you're not lying, if you're being honest about everything, if you're well prepared, you are good to go. And if we talk about what to avoid in general, it's, I already mentioned that cutting off the interviewer in between is something which can be disrespectful. You should constantly maintain eye contact. You should maintain a great body language. And it should show that you're interested, you're listening to the interviewer. You shouldn't be distracted by anything. You shouldn't have anything in your hand like a pen or a paper. You shouldn't be fidgeting, because these are signs of nervousness that people pick upon very fast. So these are a few things that you can avoid in general. And somebody has asked, how can I prepare myself and not be nervous in front of the interviewer? Okay. So again, we've discussed, right? In the first 2 slides, I mentioned that if you do those prerequisites, if you are well read, if you're researching well, if you're doing the practice where either you talk to yourself, you act, you do the role play with yourself. First, you act like an interviewer, then you act like an interview, or maybe just take help from a friend or a family member and start practicing the most common interview questions with them. It will give you confidence and you will be able to avoid nervousness at all. Then tell me about yourself, okay? Now, I'll address this question also very briefly and then we'll move ahead to the behavioral questions. So, when it comes to tell me something about yourself, a lot of people tend to blank out. Why is that? Because you're confused. You're like, what do I tell this person about myself? They already know my name. They have gone through my resume. I'm sitting here because they've gone through my resume, right? So, what do they actually want to know? So there was this situation once, I'm taking an example. I was in the panel and there was an interview going on for a college student itself for master's degree. So now the interviewer asked the student, can you tell me something about yourself? And she just told her name. She told her undergraduation degree. She gave the details for that. She told the city that she belonged to and where she lived. That's all. So now there was a very brilliant way this interviewer tackled and tried to explain her what was missing from her answer. He just simply said that since you belong to this place called Kullu in Himachal Pradesh, okay? If you go there to a grocery shop, to a person who's been selling groceries for 30 years, who's not very well educated, and you tell that person to talk about themselves, what are they going to say? They're going to say their age, where they belong to, if they've studied what they've studied, and that's it, right? So, what is the difference between that person who's not well educated, who's not looking for a job, and you? Because you're answering in the same manner and you're telling me things which are not relevant, you're telling me things which are obvious, and they're also in your resume. Second problem that a lot of people face is they end up repeating whatever's there in their resume. You end up repeating your experience, your education, your certifications, your volunteering, everything. But that's not what the person wants to know. So, what are you supposed to do? You start by introducing yourself. Of course, even though they know your name, you will say, thank you so much for that question, sir. My name is Hanspreet, and I recently finished my master's in this and this degree. Now, you'll not go overboard. You'll not go after if your recent qualification is your master's, right? You'll just say you did your master's recently. Then you'll not go overboard and say, and I did my graduation in this field and my schooling from this place, from this city, right? So you have to keep it brief and you have to combine a few elements to form that answer. So the first one could be personal details, which I just said, one liner on what my name is, where I belong to, and what is the most recent thing I did. If you did a job recently, you mentioned that. If you studied recently, you mentioned that. But don't keep going into the loop of past and mentioning everything that's already given in your resume. Now, again, for this question as well, it's very important for you to be thorough with your reading of the job description. Why? Because there you'll see the skills that the person is looking for. These could be both soft skills and hard skills, right? So essentially try to focus on soft skills. Once you've introduced yourself, just try to blend in a few pointers like your achievements, your interests, your short term goals, and most importantly, your future goals. Why? Because if you combine these elements in just one sentence each and frame an answer of about 60 seconds, it will give a gist of who you are, what your personality is, what your skills are, what your strengths are, what are you looking forward, why are you looking forward to this job, which will be covered in what are your short term goals and what is your future plan. It shows you're ambitious. So basically, when the interviewer is asking you this question, it briefly combines the elements of strengths, weaknesses, and where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? Because you're trying to give them a very short summary, a crisp gist of who you are, what you've done, what you can bring to the table, and that you're ambitious by telling them what you want to do in the future. Now, these are not the questions that the interviewer has asked you. These are some unsaid things that you have to tell them to prove them that you are really relevant and you deserve this job. Okay, now if you do not, somebody's asked, if you do not have relevant skills in regarding to the job description or in regard to the job description, that's completely okay. You're just starting off, you're just fresh out of college. You do have some soft skills, right? Somebody has good communication skills, somebody has good writing skills. Try to blend in these skills in to the job that you're going forward to show that you are going to bring in these skills and they will be handy for you. So if you have good communication skills, you know that you will be good with meetings, you will be good with presentations, so that's a plus point that they can add. They can let you lead a lot of presentations in their projects. If you think you have good research skills, that's again amazing. You will be able to research well in the company if it aligns to the company's job description or your concerns regarding that job position. So these are a few things that you can show or you can talk about, because these are some basic skills that we end up developing in the course of our school and college life. These are soft skills, and every company on earth needs soft skills, be it your communication, be it your interpersonal skills. If you think you're good with people, you can have people skills which can help you in things like bringing in more clients or talking to clients or sales pitching, right? So these are a few skills that you will have to figure out that you possess and how you can prove it to them that it is relevant. And since I already mentioned that it's relevant in all job positions, it's your job to show them how you can bring in these skills and help the company grow, help the project grow. So that's how you will have to blend it in, by figuring out first before going to the interview on what you possess, what is it that you have that you can bring in handy once you're going for that job. Okay, now there are a few more questions about strengths, weaknesses, salary. I will not be addressing them right now because there are two questions which a lot of people had asked me before, which is something I'm going to address now. So we can take up those remaining questions in the next session, but be rest assured, I will be covering all of that as well. So the two most important questions that I saw people asking when I asked you to type into the chat box is, um, one was, tell me about a time when you made a mistake, and tell me about an achievement you're proud of. How do you handle pressure? If you just look at these three questions, these are called behavioral questions or situation-based questions. Okay. Now, the best way to answer any of these questions, right? There are a lot of such questions that you will see the interviewer might ask you. The best way to tackle these questions is by using the STAR method. So maybe some of you might have watched the videos beforehand and you might have read or learned about the STAR method. Do you know what STAR is? Can somebody type it in the chat box and then I will take it up with an example. What does STAR stand for? Situation, task. Great. Thank you so much for the response, Shreya. Situation, task, action, and results, right? So now I understand that these are the questions that you cannot predict that the person or the interviewer is going to ask you. So the best way to tackle this is by creating a structure in your head. Just remember STAR: situation, task, action, and result. Now let's take an example and then I'll tell you more about it. For example, the question is, what has been your greatest personal achievement? I've kept this example very simple so that you are able to understand and you can do it on your own and you can frame your own answers and practice it later. The situation here is, so you think of a story. Basically, this is just storytelling. You have to think of a story. If the question is, what has been your greatest personal achievement? The situation that you think of is that I had to deliver a speech, but I did not have good spoken skills, right? This is a situation you have. The task was that you knew that in order to ace it, you had to practice. So that's the task you assigned yourself. The action you took towards it was that you started practicing your speech every day in front of the mirror and in front of your friends. And the result you got out of it was that you were able to deliver a great speech. So that's your one personal achievement. It's extremely simple. I know it gets very panicky when you're in that situation and a question is suddenly thrown at you. So another very simple basic tip here: when an interviewer is asking you such questions where you need to think a little, do not just blabber, just politely request the interviewer to give you a few seconds or a minute to structure your thoughts or to think about it. You can just say, ma'am or sir, Can I please get a minute to just think about it? Now, when you start blabbering, you just end up saying anything and then, you end up missing points. So, structuring your thoughts in your head is very important. So, if you're asked a question like this, just take a moment, just sit, relax. In your head, think of the star method, think of the story that you're going to tell, and then think, okay, this is the situation, this is the task that I did for it, and then this is the action that I took, and these are the results I got. Trust me, if you start practicing these kinds of questions diligently before your interview, you will be able to answer it. When you have a few stories handy, just think of which story fits in the best for the question being asked to you during that point of time, and you will be able to tackle it. So, be it the question that tell me about a time you made a mistake, again, take a moment, think about a story, and start describing it using the star method. Achievement you're proud of, again, this is the example that I just gave. How do you handle pressure? Again, maybe just think of an exam, an assignment that you had to do, a particular extracurricular that you had a responsibility towards, right? So just think of these stories beforehand, and then during the interview, ask for a minute or so, structure it in your thought process, structure it in your head wisely, and then answer it. Trust me, it will come out so smoothly. And just try to make sure that it's very short and crisp and you do not go overboard with it. So, that is something that you can do by tackling situational or behavioral questions through STAR method. So, let's do an interesting thing now. We will be doing one mock interview. Okay, we'll use the star method to do that. So the question here is, how do you handle pressure? Now I need volunteers. I need one volunteer who would want to do this mock interview with me so that you get a better hang and a better practice about it. So my question to you is, how do you handle pressure? If you're in a situation under a lot of pressure, how do you handle that? So can I get some volunteers, somebody who would really want to volunteer and do this mock interview with me so that then I can give you my inputs and we can do a one-on-one? Can I get some volunteers? Okay, so somebody has typed in. I can't see the name, but the person has written, "My name is Izaz." If I'm pronouncing that right, is there a way that I can bring them in and we can talk to them, Dr. Neha or somebody else from the Amity team? Dr. Neha, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, since I wanted to do one mock interview and I have a volunteer called Izaz, if I'm pronouncing that right. Is there a way that, they'll be able to do that right now on this call?
Right now. Okay, let me talk to the IT person and make him a panelist.
Sure.
Just give me a moment. Just give me a moment. Sachin, are you there? Are you listening to me?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes, please make Izaz a panelist.
Okay, somebody has written the question is not clear. What is not clear? I'll just repeat the mock interview situation if you want me to do that. So if Izaz is able to come in, I am going to act as an interviewer. I'm going to ask them a question, which I've already revealed, which is to tell me, okay, what was
Yes,
the question that
now Izaz
exactly?
is panelist. Izaz, you can unmute yourself.
I have indeed.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay. So the situation here is that I'm going to ask you a question, which I have already revealed. So I'm sure you got a few seconds to think about it. And you have to answer it using the star method, right? So, hi Izaz, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for asking. Appreciate it. How about you?
I'm great too. So, can we begin with the interview?
Yes, certainly.
Oh,
Please.
so since can see that you've recently graduated out of college, can you tell me how do you handle pressure? Or since you're stepping into the corporate world, you're going to be in a lot of situations where you have deadlines and you'll have to handle pressure. How do you plan to do that?
Well, I'm being an experienced professional, like I have an experience, and
Okay,
I've handled pressure in the past. And I can give you an example of one of the call. Like I've been into a call center, to be honest, and one of the customer. If you allow me, I can share that example with you.
sure, please go ahead.
I got one call, which was I was the seventh caller on the phone. So six people disconnected the phone because they followed the procedure. I won't blame them that they didn't follow the procedure. They disconnected the phone because the customer was using profanity left, right, and center. So that's the reason they were disconnecting. As soon as I got the call, so situation was that he had a family emergency and he paid $10,000 of ticket. So and he wanted to cancel and get the refund due to family emergency and hospitalization. So I remember how to handle this task because I have worked on this and I had practiced about this situation, and I didn't take things personally when he started using foul language on me. And so after I did that, and so when the customer, I said, I patiently listened to him. He was abusing left, right, and center, and after a minute of patience, I just held up to my conversation. I kept quiet. Then he said, "Are you there?" After using all the profanity, I said, "Yes, I'm here." And I did listen to everything what he said. And I'm so sorry, my colleagues disconnected the phone because they were following the procedure. You know why I didn't disconnect the phone? He asked why. Because when you made this reservation, you became a part of a family member. When I haven't left hands of my happy customer, a part of a family member Expedia group, do you think I'm going to leave your hand and leave you in the middle of nowhere? So the customer was so overwhelmed. He apologized and he wept on the call actually. And I tried to help him. It took a couple of days and week to solve the problem, but I always kept on calling him and whenever I need to give him update. So this was one of the fantastic experience. I got awarded for this as well.
No, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Izaz, for volunteering.
Welcome.
It was
Welcome.
really wonderful to have you. So let's discuss a few pointers. So this is something, and this is a part where we are actually trying to help each other. So I would want to know from the participants, is there something that you would like to say to Izaz? It could be appreciation of what you liked about his answer. It could be a few pointers if you think, he had some scope of improvement. If you could just put it on the chat box and then I can discuss. Any observations? The way of expressing empathy was really good. I believe he aced it. He did ace it. It was really amazing. Anything else? He tackled the question very well. He can be a little more precise. Rest the answer was great. Wholesome answer. Following procedures and addressing issues. Okay. Okay. So he put his customer first and cared about the future of the company, and relationship was retained with the client. Great. That's actually a very niche observation, personal experience and skills on why they should hire him. Great. Amazing. So, Izaz, you actually did a really good job. You started by thanking me for the question. You had a lot of humbleness, groundedness, politeness in your answer. You looked confident. You sounded great. There was clarity in speech. But if I have to give a few pointers, just based on my personal observation, it would be that I could see there was a lot of repetition of the word and. So that usually sometimes indicates or that marks as a filler. Sometimes when you're not able to understand or you're confused on what sentence structure you're trying to answer, you end up repeating a lot of words, right? So those are called fillers, and that's absolutely normal. A lot of people do that. But the way to avoid fillers could be, again, practice. That's the only way that you all can actually avoid fillers, doing repetition of words. Because I did notice a few repetitions as well. Somebody really mentioned a great point, which I actually did note down, which was that you could be a bit more precise. So I also felt like you exaggerated the story a little. I told you that you have to make it very crisp, very short. So just try to shorten it and make it crisper as much as you can. So these are just some very, very, niche pointers that are absolutely normal. A lot of people do that. But again, I'm just pointing those out to you because I think you have the potential. You're great. You were confident. You were polite. So these are some next level things that you can work on to ace it and take it up a notch. So thank you so much for that.